We often talk about forgiveness in the context of forgiving others. We much less often talk about forgiveness in the context of forgiving ourselves. And I think, arguably, forgiving ourselves is harder than forgiving other people. I think as human beings, we're very hard on ourselves. And honestly, I was very curious to why. I haven't done much academic research on this topic, but I've definitely done some observational research and I've taken some notes of the way people communicate their frustrations about themselves implicitly and explicitly. And I think at its core, our inability to forgive ourselves often comes from a lack of worthiness. We feel maybe that we're not worth forgiving. And this can show up in many different ways. Maybe you hurt someone else and you can't forgive yourself for hurting a person that you cared about. Maybe somebody hurt you and you can't forgive yourself for being so gullible. Maybe you did something when you were 13 and you can't forgive yourself for how you acted when you were 13. God knows. But there's so many ways in which we don't forgive ourselves. And the more and more and more I thought about it, the more I realized it comes down to a lack of self-respect and a lack of worthiness or feelings of worthiness. Because let me tell you something. Grace is a very important thing to me. It's one of the core values that I have. And I realize grace is just not something that's very prevalent in our society. And it's so obvious in the way we treat others and in the way we treat ourselves. And I believe we can't treat others with grace until we treat ourselves with grace. I mean, I'll talk about me personally, right? Me personally, I used to have so much resentment towards the younger versions of myself and so much shame about how I conducted myself. And for so long, I couldn't let go of those feelings. Even if I said I forgave myself, I really didn't. But one day, it just clicked. It just clicked that I am being so mean to the younger versions of myself, that were trying so hard and doing the best that they could to survive in the world with the tools they had available to them and the knowledge they had available to them. And it made me very sad when I realized how mean I was being, because I think we tend to dehumanize ourselves. We see our past versions, I don't know exactly as what, but not as a human being, not with the empathy of a human being. We see ourselves as people who should have known better. What do you mean, should have known better? How? How are we supposed to know better? We knew what we knew at the time. And if you acted in a way that you're not happy with, but you were ignorant or unaware of any other way to act, how is that fair to not forgive yourself? How is that fair to expect yourself to have known better? It's actually a ridiculous premise to say that I should have known better. I say that to myself all the time, and it's such a ridiculous premise. Because at the end of the day, how would you have known better? You gotta give yourself some grace. You gotta forgive yourself for not being perfect, for not knowing what you didn't know, for literally being a human being. I remember I did so many things that I felt were embarrassing or shameful that I literally wanted to black out my past. I wanted to forget those versions of me. And I realized one day how wrong of me that was, because it erased all the amazing things about that person and negated all the amazing things about that person. Yeah, I might have screwed up a little bit, but I had so much resilience and I fought through so much in my life and still tried to be better every day and still tried to do better every day. And that's really all you can ask yourself. And doing better, sometimes that looks like 5%, sometimes that looks like 50, sometimes that looks like 100. Not every day is equal. That is the cycles of life. Some days you're really good, some days you're not. But at the end of the day, every day you're trying. And that's something to admire. Instead of giving ourselves so much criticism for not doing better or not trying harder, when we know full well we were trying our hardest. At the time, we were trying our hardest. So why are we so hard on ourselves? For me, I think what really was the final nail in the coffin is separating myself entirely in my view. I pulled myself out and I was like, what if this was someone I cared deeply about? What if I looked at my life, but I imagined it to be someone I cared about instead of me? And the way I saw that person with so much empathy and kindness and grace, and how I saw that person as someone who was just trying so hard to survive and who did their best. I was so proud of that girl. So why is it so different when I think about that girl as myself? It's something I struggled with a lot. It's something I still struggle with, I would say, just not nearly as much. I think in terms of my past, I really have forgiven myself. And in forgiving myself, I was able to also truly forgive other people because I realized I thought I'd forgiven a lot of people for the role they played in the hurt that I felt. But in reality, I still harbored a lot of resentment. And that wasn't fair of me. They were young and human too. And they're fallible, just like I'm fallible. But it wasn't until I could give myself that kindness that I was able to give that kindness to them. I'm not going to lie. I think, especially in romantic relationships, it can feel a lot harder because you have to be a lot more vulnerable in a romantic relationship, which just feels so silly. And you feel like a newborn baby covered in oil, slipping about, unaware of how to act or how to be. It's so nerve wracking and so difficult to be vulnerable. And then to be vulnerable and have things not work out can be really hard. And it can be really hard to forgive yourself in those cases, whether you're the perpetrator of harm or you're the one that has been harmed, or if you just didn't act in accordance to your values or to your principles. It's very difficult. And I don't think there ever comes a time, or maybe there does, and I just haven't reached that point where it becomes so automatic to forgive yourself. But I think every time I catch myself being a little too hard on me, I take a step back and I look at myself as if I was someone I love. And it really helps me treat myself with a lot more grace. And on the topic of grace, as a general point, we should all be treating each other with a lot more grace, ourselves and each other. But I feel as a society, we're so not graceful anymore. We don't allow people to be human, especially in this age of social media and the idea of perfectionism. We do not give ourselves grace to be human or other people grace to be human. Cancel culture is a great example of this. We cancel people for things that, if be honest, nobody is there recording you. Be honest. You have said many, many, many cancelable things before. So why are we canceling other people? They're just human. Okay, there are some very offensive cancelable acts, but cancel culture right now is ridiculous. You can get canceled for literally anything. And it even spans into like meeting new people and getting to know new people. We make new friends and we don't give them grace to be human. We say, oh, if your friend doesn't do this or if they don't do that, if they don't answer you at this time, or if they are MIA for a while, or if they don't hang out with you all the time, they're a bad friend. Give people grace. They have their own lives, especially as an adult. Seeing each other that often, talking to each other that often is just not feasible. Not if you want to maintain good long term friendships. Give people grace. Or in relationships, when you get to know someone new, people don't give you grace if you don't act in accordance to a way that someone is expecting. Or if someone doesn't act in accordance to the way you're expecting, we write them off. We don't take a moment to think about, oh, this is a human being that has human issues that may have a reason for acting in a way that's off what I'm expecting. And instead of having a conversation with that person to get to know why is it that you acted in this way, or being afforded the opportunity to say why it is you acted in a certain way and be given grace. Instead, we just write them off. So I do want to talk about this topic of grace in a different episode. But in regards to forgiveness, grace, I think, is at the foundation of forgiveness. Until you can give yourself grace, grace to be a fallible human being, grace to exist messily in this world, you'll never be able to forgive yourself because you'll continue to pass judgment on yourself. And if you can't give yourself grace, you'll never be able to give other people grace. And, forgiveness is your most powerful tool. It sets you free, honestly. Because even with this podcast, right, I would have never been able to put myself out on a public platform if I didn't give myself grace to be a human being. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a robot. I can't come on here and say the perfect thing or do the perfect thing. Sometimes I wonder if what I'm saying even makes any sense. Yet here I am because I recognize that I'm imperfect, I'm human, and I never used to give myself that grace. And when I was thinking about what was different this time that I felt so at ease and confident and comfortable to pursue this endeavor, genuinely it's that I give myself grace and I don't expect myself to be perfect. The idea of being who I am so publicly is scary. But you know what's scarier? Not being who I am. And that is what I risked doing before I gave myself grace. So give yourself grace. Give yourself grace and forgive yourself. And if you're having a hard time forgiving yourself, view yourself from the outside. Imagine someone you really care about, someone you really love and admire. and imagine your story is their story. Would you see them with the same critical eye that you see yourself? If not, you already know that you're the problem and that you need to learn how to forgive yourself and give yourself grace so that you can move forward in life. It's unbelievable how much shame can hold you back, how much your own critical thinking of yourself can hold you back. At the end of the day, guess what? You're going to make more mistakes. You're going to do more embarrassing things. I do embarrassing things all the time, all the time. But somehow I no longer feel embarrassed. I do get, okay, look, I'm human. Like, I do get embarrassed in the moment, maybe for a day or two, a week after. I'm human. Sometimes it is worse than others, but generally I always am at ease with the fact that at least I was myself and at least I was true to who I am and I was doing my best and I was always acting out of kindness and out of grace for others and for myself. And I never regret it because I truly believe if you are acting out of a good place, you're doing your best and you mess up, so what? So what? Everybody messes up. Everybody messes up. Everybody is embarrassing. Everybody does things that they don't want people to know about. Everybody wishes that they could just be perfect. But you know what? Even that is stupid. Why do we wish to be perfect? Why? Only because we found a way to curate a perfect image online and we've convinced ourselves that we have to match this perfect image that we've created online of ourselves. Before the idea of an online presence or persona, I think people were much more open to being human. But with the rise of social media and online presence, we have effectively dehumanized ourselves and thus also dehumanized other people. But listen, it doesn't matter how much technology you slap in front of our faces, we're still human. We're still going to make mistakes. We're still fallible. Accept that. Accept that even when you try your best, you'll make mistakes and you'll be imperfect and that imperfection is beautiful and that imperfection is what made you who you are. What would be the joy of life if you came out of the womb a perfect little artificial thing? Then you'd be a robot. Then you'd actually be a robot because a robot at its inception point is a full robot. But if you even think about it, even artificial intelligence makes mistakes and has to learn. So what? We allow artificial intelligence the grace to learn, but we don't allow ourselves the grace to learn and make mistakes. I think for my age group, being in my mid 20s, a lot of feelings of shame and self criticism come up in relation to romantic relationships or friendships. And these feelings of shame and resentment came up a lot, at least for me, in my interpersonal relationships, especially romantic relationships. I'll give you an example in my life. I am very, very inexperienced at dating. I have never really been in love or in a serious long term relationship. To be honest, I've barely even dated, like properly dated. So I don't know anything. And the first couple years, because I only really started dating my junior year of college and then COVID hit. So I really only have 2 years of dating experience. In the first year, I was so hard on myself about not knowing the things I didn't know. And to be fair, others were hard on me about that too. They couldn't understand that I didn't understand. And they didn't give me the grace to figure it out. And I didn't give myself the grace to figure it out. I always put on a front like, no, I know what I'm talking about. No, this I know, I know. I never asked. I never said I don't know. This past year, I decided to be a lot more candid about it. And you know what? Some people understand and some people don't. Most people accept that I don't understand things, but not a lot of people have the capacity or grace or mental acuity to actually fathom what that means or to give me the space to be. And you know, if I had experienced these things last year, it would have crippled me. I would have felt like I don't know how to be in a relationship. I'll never be in a relationship. I'm just too much. There's something wrong with me. But now I just realize that if someone isn't able to give me the grace to be fallible and to be human, I give myself that grace and that's okay. And honestly, I feel empathy for them because if you can't show me grace, you definitely are not showing yourself grace. So it's fine because I show myself grace. And I know that the people that are meant to be in my life will also show me grace. And I give others grace. But I can only be this person because it started with me. It started with working with myself. A lot of the advice that you see on me on social media nowadays in relation to how you treat others is great. It's amazing. And I know not everything can be all encompassing. So I understand that. But as consumers, I think sometimes we take things too literal and don't think of them in a context. And while it's important to treat others well, we will always struggle to treat others well or with kindness or with grace or to give others forgiveness if we can't give ourselves forgiveness. I'd like to leave you with this. I'd like you to reflect on your narrative. Think about the ways that you are being harsh to yourself. Think about the ways that you can give yourself more grace because this is a long life, and a long life without grace sucks. So do some reflecting, allow yourself to be human and fallible, give yourself some grace, and see how honestly how much better life will become. Because once you stop expecting perfection from yourself and others, you're actually able to enjoy life and you're able to see the beauty in the mundane and imperfect because you are not looking for an artificial sense of perfection. You are steeped in the joy of the mess that is life. Anyways, this was a good talk. You have a good one. We'll talk again soon. All right. Bye.